Hey, gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, and I know a lot of you are pretty anxious about the economy, and rightly so. I mean, you may have seen that the national debt's just topped $32 trillion, and this comes along with recent rate hikes from the Fed and news that wage growth is not outpacing inflation. Of course, we've got the R word being used more and more, recession. So welcome to the wonderful world of Bidenomics. But my guest today, he not only offers keen insights into what's really going on in the economy, he's also a master at teaching others how to financially flourish in the midst of all of this insanity. I'm joined once again by Scott Scheel, author, film producer, Fox business contributor, two-time Congressional Businessman of the Year, and of course, the founder of Commercial Academy, one of the top commercial real estate training programs in the nation. Scott, welcome back, my friend. It's great to see you again.
Dr. Steve, it's so good to see you, sir. Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with you and to get the opportunity to speak with the folks that you attract. They are the core foundation of our nation. And, it always makes me so sad when people begin to doubt who we are.
Yeah.
And, the rumors of our demise are greatly exaggerated. I hope to speak to that, to give people confidence that you are forced to live in the times in which you were born.
Yeah.
God doesn't make mistakes that way. So these are things that we can all handle if we can tune out all of the distraction, all of the, let's call it the white noise and the interference that's going on, which can come from spiritual forces. They can come from the physical embodiment that is the mouthpiece of those spiritual forces that are trying to cloud our judgment. I want everybody to know that they can flourish in these times. They can be confident. They can live a wonderful life. And they can look back on so many of those turbulent events that we've already lived through that were supposed to be our undoing historically, going back 50, 60, 70 years with the racial strife, that had gone on, and, the civil rights movement of the late 60s and the wars that were going on, and outrageous inflations of the 70s and energy crises, and, the demise of the United States at the end of the, 70s going into the 80s, when we were resurrected to a certain degree by wonderful leadership that told us that we really were unique and special in the world. Those are the things that I think people don't necessarily correlate to their day-to-day financial wealth and well-being. And so we try to warn people of what's coming so they can protect themselves and brace against what's coming. But now that it's here, I think our ability to go ahead and persevere through the storm is the most important part of what I hope people will take away from our time together today.
That's so awesome, Scott. That's a beautifully put. So how do you, just big picture perspective, how do you see the economy right now? Are things as bad as they seem? I'm sure it's a nuanced picture, but just give us sort of big picture. What are you seeing?
Well, what I see, again, we focus so much on people building wealth through fixed assets, meaning you can create a lot of wealth through ownership of real things. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I love about fixed assets, which is real estate by and large, is that it's something that you can actually improve upon on an immediate basis. But when we talk about what's going on in the stock market, what's going on in the currency market, what's going, let's say, in the job market with some of the weak reports that just come out, as you know, stagnant wage growth, inflation a little bit out of control.
Yeah.
I think the capitulation of the recognition that we've been in recession for a while, interest rates spiking, all of those things tend to lead to opportunity as I see it, because what's happening is the things that had caused these run up in values, the outrageous price of homes, the outrageous price of, let's say, durable goods, automobiles and things of that nature, appliances, food, energy, the run up in inflation. When you start to see some of the forces that are at play right now, it creates opportunity for people to get their arms around things that have long-term and intrinsic value, meaning, look, a brick is always what a brick is worth, right? And it may be worth more tomorrow than it was today, but at some point in time, it's a physical asset and it's not replaceable unless somebody produces something. Whereas so many things that are out there, I believe, like stock market investments, cryptocurrency, things of those nature, those are kind of fiat investments, right? It's like, well, it's worth it because somebody says it's worth it, not because it provides any real value.
Mm-hmm,
Well, I
mm-hmm.
like to get people to focus on things that have real value. And I will tell you that those who can begin to find ways of getting involved in games like real estate or, let's say, stores of value, uh, the precious metals, things of that nature, or those blue chip companies that really produce things that aren't necessarily so much information based, although information is not a problem, but that actually are gateways,
Right.
can really provide themselves with an unbelievable opportunity over the course of the next 12 to 36 months that are going to provide long-term value, 10, 20, 30 years of, let's say, future benefit. And so that's kind of a convoluted way of saying I'm excited about the opportunities that are here. I'm not depressed about it. You're going to see blood in the streets, I think. I think there's going to be some stuff that's undermined. I think the emperor, to a certain degree, is going to find out that he is not well clothed. Um, and therefore, the charade of
Yeah.
what's going on in the banking sector, right? I think the
Mm,
banking sector has its problems. I would tell people to be concerned. I think the currency is far less at risk than we would be led to believe. I think governmental spending has to be reined in. And those are the things that will bring the market back to normalcy rather than all this free capital and this quantitative easing, the, let's say, stimulus dollars that have propped up an economy that should have corrected long ago.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you see the international de-dollarization? Are you concerned about that at all? We're talking like so countries like Saudi Arabia, China, Russia. They're talking a lot now about doing business entirely in other currencies.
Well, I think there's a temptation for them to want to do it. I think there's a lot of reasons to do it. But let's talk about what the alternatives are. The
mm,
alternatives today aren't terribly appealing, right? Where would you go? Would you go with a communist controlled government that's already shown a willingness to declare war on its own citizenry in China? Probably
mm,
not. Uh, are any other economies stable or large enough to be able to be the standard bearer of trade? I think it's the bad actors and those that know that they are, let's say, not solidly based, that want to usurp U.S. supremacy and hegemony in that area. But long term, I think if you take a look at a globalist's perspective, you have to weaken the standard first before you might create a global digital currency. And I would absolutely see that as a long term ambition if those ambitions are not undermined by the citizens who would ultimately potentially be enslaved by that sort of a system.
mm, mm. Yeah.
So,
Yo, good,
so,
please.
so I guess that, again, to answer it, I mean, I take these meandering routes to the answer to your question, and I don't mean to do that. Do I see it as a real risk short term? I don't. I think the U.S. dollar has real reasons why it's been stable for as long as it is. I
Right.
don't see a lot of great alternatives. I think again the Irans of the world, the Brazils of the world, the Russias of the world, the Chinas of the world, even the South Africas of the world. They've got real reasons why they might want to go in that direction, but I don't know that the trust factor is there for the
Right.
rest of governance to go that way. And even the up and coming nation of India, right? Are
Yeah.
they really ready for that move?
Right.
I
Right.
don't see it. I think they're in as much or more of a precarious position because of, while they've got great citizenry and education and they've got, let's say, the right makeup because of their British colonial heritage, the poverty that they have is
Mm,
just
mm.
so staggeringly um, pervasive that it's almost impossible to overcome. They need countries that are more into nation building. And I'm not talking about the Belt and Road strategy of President Xi, but I think what you're really talking about are nations that want to do it for the concept of lifting up a citizenry to make them a productive society that will then be a consumer society, rather than those who are looking to get somebody or a nation, let's say, uh, beholden to them because you've made some investments in them only for the exploitation of that nation.
Right,
What I
right.
think the Chinese model is.
Right, right. That's. I know a lot of our audience is very concerned with central bank digital currencies for the exact same reason. The manipulative, consequence that's entailed in CBDCs. I mean, the Fed is, looks like it's looking into things like that. But again, are you do you see something like a CBDC in our future? Or
Well,
it's just, again, is just like you're saying, is, do Americans have way too much have we been trained too well in thinking of money as real estate, and as opposed to some kind of digital fiat?
well, I think that's a great question. And kind of like you and I were talking before we went live about the election, it depends on which way the water sheds.
Mm.
Do I think that CBDC is an ambition? I absolutely do. I think the
Hmm.
central banks don't want to give up their monopoly on, let's say, economic um, exchange.
Hmm.
Right? They love to be that gateway.
Yeah.
They love to be able to do things that the average bear can't in printing currency and fractionalizing their ability to print debt and to create, debt, which ultimately is the driver of the economy. So $32
Hmm.
trillion dollars, which we all look back at as a horrible thing, just shows how effective they've been
Right.
at
Right.
printing and creating value for themselves.
Right.
And the fractionalized reserve system is one that is really truly broken. We know that it's not at I think doubt in anyone's mind. Now, going back to the core of that question, digital currency makes all the sense in the world. But
Hmm.
central bank digital currency is, again, too much power in the hands of too few.
Right.
So, blockchain validation, where you're not just relying on one reporting entity that can sit back and say, hey, you know, even though you may not necessarily like it or you might not necessarily believe in it, do individual Russian citizens deserve to have their entire wealth frozen just because they're Russians? Now, maybe they may
Right.
be oligarchs because they've got labeled as such, but if the United States does something that, let's say, the World Monetary Fund, or sorry, the International Monetary Fund, or the World Bank doesn't like, do they have the right to come in and freeze us?
Right.
Does the World Health Organization have the right to immunize Americans because Joe Biden signed maybe some treaty? Well,
Right.
I would say we don't.
Right.
So
Right.
if the Biden administration, through executive order, which they've tried to do, has the right to create a central bank digital currency, well, then we're in trouble. But if it's left up to the states, as I think kind of seems to be the case, and I think at least Florida and North Dakota have taken a stand against saying, well, this will never happen. It can't happen here.
Right. Right.
I think it just takes a couple of folks to stand in the way of that.
Yeah.
Now, the banks want it. They know that the currency has been in transition for a while. They're trying to criminalize ownership of currency. They're
Mm.
trying to get their hands in anything that you do over $600. So they're definitely putting up the guardrails to force the cattle into that pen for the slaughter. But I think the people are kind of wise to it and kind of awakening to it.
Yeah.
Do I think it will happen? I think they're trying. I know it failed miserably in Nigeria. The adaptation in Nigeria was less than 2%. Even when they cut off the money supply and were able to diminish transactional autonomy down to a level that would be inconceivable for individuals and companies in America. So I think there's a lot of resistance. The question is do good men and women stand by and allow evil to happen before them without speaking up? And that's why I know one of the things that's so important for you is that we raise our voices in this next election.
Right.
These are financial questions. This is how your family's well-being will be carried out over the course of your lifetime. If we
Right.
let this watershed moment occur without standing up and saying it has to be done to this standard, without this, let's say, the ability to turn off what you are able to spend your money on. where you're able to spend your money.
Mhm.
Um, if we don't put those standards in place before we allow the government to trade out our paper currency for digital currency, because the innocuous argument says, well, you're already operating in a digital currency, Steve, right?
Right.
When was the last time you handed over $35,000 to buy anything of substance? Never.
Right.
You put it on a credit card, you allowed a wire transfer to occur. All of those things happen digitally. So it's not a paper transaction, but it's very different if you get under the hood. And so the idea of blockchain validation, that yes, Steve can afford this transaction and it's validated by all of these independent sources, right?
Mhm.
Blockchain. Well, that makes sense. But when that blockchain all leads back to one source that,
Yeah.
again, has never been truly audited, that doesn't hold accountability, that obviously fractionalizes way beyond any responsible level, what you're doing is you're now taking, I think, yourself out of the frying pan and jumping directly into the fire. So we've got to stop it
Right.
at all costs.
Right.
Do I think it's going to happen? I pray that it doesn't. I don't want it to. Is it a possibility? It is a possibility. And quite honestly, it's the conversion factor that makes me most concerned.
Yeah.
What will your $1,000,000, your $10,000 be worth in the new economy? Is there equity involved?
Mhm.
Does your heritage or ethnic background or even racial profile change your conversion rate of your dollars and the wealth that you've worked so hard for
Wow.
in your life when we make that conversion?
Wow.
And that's something that's incredibly uh, sobering to
Yeah.
consider.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, you're right. Mine. This goes a lot deeper than I thought. Wow. Absolutely. Well, yeah. I mean, getting back into the real world. I mean, you're of course you're a real estate wizard, and I'm curious. Are you seeing anything? You sort of alluded to this earlier. Are you seeing anything particularly interesting in the housing market in light of all of this stuff going on?
Tons of it. So much of the housing market, and this is something that really wasn't exposed. Remember when it was impossible to buy a home and it was, so many of these homes were being sold in a day
Yeah.
without appraisals and over market, and in some of the more heated markets, let's say like Florida or Texas, where I had colleagues that were literally doing wholesale warehouse flips of hundreds of properties a month, right?
Wow. Wow.
And the reason that happened was because there were funds that were buying, and they weren't being purchased by individuals. These were massive warehouse loans that were being out there to drive the market higher,
Mm.
to ultimately um, create a market scenario. And then all of a sudden, early this year, right after that midterm election, all of those lines closed down.
Mm.
And I have to tell you that the amount of default that is in the banking system right now that has yet to be recognized it's unbelievable.
Wow.
Um, there was something that was called a troubled asset deferral program. Okay. That troubled asset deferral program terminated January 1 of 2022, but they had up to 180 days to even begin to assess it. And only now have those things started to be recognized, which is why you hear so many people talking about the regional banks and the trouble that they're in. And the trouble that they're in is largely predicated on the fact that, well, the asset that you bought, whether it was an office building in the downtown central business district, which there are thousands of those that are in trouble to the tunes of many, many hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars, all the way down to, well, who can afford to buy this home at $700,000 that it sold for last year when interest rates have effectively gone from 3.5% to 7%? Nobody.
Right.
Doesn't
Right.
work that way,
Right.
right? There's no more buyers for these homes. And even at that, there's not even renters for most of these homes.
Mm.
Means that you're going to see massive correction in the marketplace. So if you're looking for investments, please be patient. The course of the next 12 months are going to put people in a lot of opportunity. Preservation of capital. People are like, well, my money's going down in value because inflation's at 5, 6, 7%. I'm losing value. No, your reinvestment rate after the collapse tells me that your cash, your credit, and your buying power are king.
Wow.
Those are the things that are going to allow you to make up for lost time as the correction comes. And I got to tell you right now, I mean, we're dealing with defaulted REITs. And again, this doesn't necessarily translate to your everyday mom and pop who are looking to make a little investment, but it does from a fractionalized perspective
Hmm.
because people's ability to invest when you're buying low and selling high. Right now, people have been buying high and trying to sell higher. That was the
Hmm.
model over the last 4 or 5 years. Certainly post pandemic, when look, there's nobody working, it's all
Right.
stimulus money.
Right.
The obvious nature of the economy is being undermined, and yet things are still better. Stock market's better, values are going higher, savings is higher. How is that possible? Well, it wasn't. And we now know that, again, that was a ruse. So the things that we're seeing in the housing market is that it's propped up, that the correction is coming, that so many of the defaults are being delayed, but they will be here by third or fourth quarter of this year. You're going to see them. The regional banks are going to start to show their cracks. And you know who's going to come to the rescue? The large national banks.
Hmm.
They're going to
Hmm.
consolidate like they have in cycle after cycle after cycle, and your borrowing options will be fewer. They'll interest rates will drop, but no one will be lending. So your ability to consolidate with citizens and investors, I think, is really the best wave moving forward. It's that fractionalized participation. And there's a lot of dry money on the sidelines waiting for the investment, but the values are still a little higher than I think they need to be. So if you're looking to buy that home, if you bought your home at the top of the last market, the most important thing is if you've got lines of credit, know that those can and are likely to be drawn or taken from you. Banks will not allow those to continue to persist. Um, and the good news is that the wave of opportunity, I think, is coming. And so for those who can afford to be patient, your patience is going to be rewarded in 24, 25, 26, and 27. And people will look back like they did at those who invested in 09, 10, 11, and 12 and say, man, I wish I could go back and invest then. Well, just rest assured that your time to invest is coming. And you're
Wow.
going to be buying at values significantly below where it was in 16, 17, 18, and 19, where it was hard to make an investment because there were too many people competing for your dollar.
Right. Right. We've got a link down below for people to click on to check out Commercial Academy, which the training program that you run. It's just it's a huge, it's a whole resource center, really. Can you give us a little sense of how, if somebody clicks on that link, they check out the website and so forth, how can Commercial Academy help people, guide patriots out there trying to flourish financially during this time?
Well,
How
that's
can
my
it help?
hope, is that people will
Yeah.
be optimistic and not necessarily read the negativity that's going on because you're getting bombarded with it so much.
Right.
This is the window of opportunity that we're excited about. So when they click on that link, Steve, what they're going to find is a free access to what we call huge profits in commercial real estate. And what it does is it explains how your average person can start to understand why fixed assets and why real estate has been the standard bearer of wealth creation for more than a century,
Right.
right? Since the average person was actually able to own land. And that was one of the greatest founding principles of America,
Right.
right? Serfs couldn't own
Right.
land, only the aristocrats and
Right.
only the king, right? Or the dukes or the
Right.
princes could own land. But your ability to own land, and land that's productive, whether it's agricultural, whether it's retail, whether it's residential, or even multifamily housing, whether it's distribution networks, whether it's industrial property where you produce things, the value of that land can be largely leveraged. You don't need the money to buy it. That it is a physical asset provides so many of the means necessary to acquire it.
Right.
And then it's through holding it over a period of time. And I have to tell you that there are so many folks around who would be happy to give you the difference between what the property will generate and what you need to be, let's say, the person on the title, the owner of that asset.
Mhm.
You can start small, and it teaches you how to do it without abandoning ship. So if you're, let's say, you're a landscaper, let's say you're a construction worker, let's say you're a union guy, let's say you're somebody who's a school teacher, You don't have to quit your job to add this component to what you're doing. And because you're able to borrow money against a fixed asset, done right, you don't even have to guarantee the debt. So it's a safe, kind of steady, get rich for sure program that over the course of a 3, 5, 10-year window, people can end up in places in their career and in their finances that they never imagined getting into. And it can happen much sooner than that, but it allows for even the most cautious to
Right.
create that type of wealth and productivity. But in this cycle that we're in right now, you're getting this massive tailwind pushing you forward because values are really declining and the interest in these fixed assets is waned. People don't
Right.
know what to do. And
Right.
so I'm such a contrarian. I like to buy when people are selling and I like to sell when people are buying.
Yeah.
And that has served us quite well. And it's served most of the colleagues that people are going to encounter from the Commercial Academy incredibly well. In addition to that link, Steve, we also have an upcoming event in my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio. We're celebrating our 20-year anniversary of the Commercial Academy. And I'm doing something that I haven't done in 13 years. It's called the Academy in Action. And we're literally taking people into the field. They're going to see the properties, they're going to walk them, they're going to learn the case studies from actual real world deals that are happening and have happened, kind of cradle to grave. And it takes them out of this world of philosophical understanding and it gets them right down to, wow, you can see it, smell it, touch it, kick the tires, and understand and imagine how you might be able to take these ideas back into your own world and make them happen in your backyard.
Love it. We've had so many in our audience attend your conferences, get involved in Commercial Academy, and I've only heard the most amazing things coming from it. Gang, make sure to click on that link below. Check out what Scott has to offer here. This is life-changing stuff where you can really take action, start building your own personal parallel economy for yourself, for your loved ones. Scott specializes in changing lives and making dreams happen. So click on that link below, join
Very
Commercial
kind.
Academy, turn financial fear into financial flourishing, right? That's what Scott does. He's amazing. Thanks so much, Scott. We're going to have you back real soon. And just as we continue to navigate these crazy and complex economic dynamics.
Well, and I apologize. I know sometimes when we get into these bigger, more complex topics, especially when you're reading into the weeds, I like to get into the reasons why I think things are happening. But just know, many of the things that we've talked about, and I've talked with your team with Ralph and, the rest of the team, we really are going to be presenting a very straightforward, simple, step-by-step approach. And I think with the huge profits program, people see that it's layman's terms, and it's something that anybody can get involved with. And those are the pieces of guidance I think we hope to be able to continue to bring to your platform, because if we can empower patriots financially, those are the things I think they're going to help us win those local elections.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That really is the grassroots of making sure that our values here in the heartland of America, where I live in Ohio, and in the breadbasket of the world, not just America, starts to get us towards those coastal regions where so much influence is imbalanced.
Right.
We've got to go ahead and make sure that America is really a representative nature, and that we don't find ourselves in a situation where too much power is concentrated in too many small cities,
Right.
too
Right.
many large cities.
Yeah, yeah, and in the hands of the very few. They're calling it refeudalization. It actually works perfectly with the way you were talking about how only the aristocrats could own land. The whole purpose of aristicizing everyone, as it were, that democratization of that land ownership. Exactly.
And
Yeah.
we're a
Yeah.
republic, right? We're not a
Right.
democracy. We're a representative
Exactly.
republic.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
if we as individuals recognize how special this land is and the way that we do things, I can tell you, I'm a high school educated kid from the east side of Cleveland, Ohio. I grew up very, very modestly. And today I can tell you that if it wasn't for the system that we have and the things that we are presenting and the things that you're trying so fervently to preserve, my friend, um, it's just not possible. I'm going nowhere real fast.
Right.
But we've changed tens of thousands of lives of people. Doesn't matter where they came from, what they look like, what their background is, what their heritage is, whether they even speak the language well. They're able to do things that are truly amazing because of what we have And that's why it's so important that we fight to preserve it through your platform, and why I'm so excited to be here. And, you're going to continue to help me make sure that I connect with your audience. And I hope people got value out of what we presented today. But again, it's humbling, and I really appreciate you taking the time to allow me to spend a few moments with your friends.
It's our honor, Scott, and we'll have you back real soon.
God bless everyone. Thanks so much.
God bless.
Peace.